Welcome everyone back to the Divine Feminine Healers podcast. I am so excited to have Jenn Pike on the podcast today. Jenn Pike is a functional medicine practitioner and she specializes in helping women heal from their hormones. And she also helps female practitioners start their businesses and build them to a thriving state. So thank you so much for being here, Jenn.
Thanks for having me.
A question that I ask everyone who comes on this podcast, obviously because of the name, but I also am fascinated with how each of us has such a divine connection to the divine feminine, and it expresses herself in a lot of different ways. So I'd love to hear from you. How do you connect to your divine feminine essence, and what does that look like when you really express your divine feminine?
I mean, for me, it's in a lot of different ways. So the thing that comes to mind first, it's been such a huge part of my life always, is movement. So the way in which I move my body is part of how I connect to that divine feminine energy within. A lot of what I do in my life is cyclical living based. So it's based on the phases where I'm at in my cycle. Like for instance, right now I'm in my menstrual phase. So the things that I'm doing for my body are much more gentle. You know, it's walking, being in nature, and really just tapping and tuning in. And that feels really good versus the opposite, which could be, who cares where my body is at? The program says this, the class is this, I need to go hard and like crush it and PR everything and, you know, get as many steps in today as I can. The other side of it for me, it's simple things. So how I nourish my body and really making that a priority of like eating well and hydrating. You know, it might sound silly, but I wear earrings all the time, regardless if I'm teaching yoga or not. It's one of the ways that I've grown up in an industry where fitness is my background. And so I've been wearing spandex for like 30 years. And so I've always been like, how can I like zhuzh myself up a little bit? And earrings were always that thing for me. And so now it's like, I feel naked as a woman if I don't have my earrings on. And then color. So rarely will you ever see me wearing black. Like I love color, you know, I want to bring that into my life. And so those are some simple things that I do in my own day in my life that tap me and tune me into the feminine. I would say like as a mom and in our household, like hugging, I make it a priority to like hug everyone in the house. That just feels to me very, you know, it just helps me tune back into my feminine energy and feels really loving.
I love all those. It's such a testament of how integrated that really is for you, that you get the full spectrum of all the different shades the divine feminine really wears. And I love that you brought up this theme of cycles. That's very much, as an Ayurvedic practitioner, how I really see the feminine, if we're kind of doing it from more of like as logistical as we can, and really understanding how we do go through these ebbs and flows. And one more thing, because I do want to dive more deeper into that, but I totally feel you on the earrings thing, because when I became a full-time yoga instructor, I was like, okay, like I love dressing up, like that's one of my favorite things. And even though I'm so stoked that I get to be comfortable all the time, like I used to rock out earrings all the time too. So yeah, I really love that. So back going to our different cycles that we have within our body, I'm curious, was there a particular part of your cycle that you felt disconnected from during your personal healing journey with your hormones? And how were you able to get back in alignment with that cycle?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've been really practicing. I've been very aware of my body and cycle as a whole, literally as long as I can remember. You know, I was like, when I was a teen, I was reading like Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weishler and like charting and doing all of those things. Like I started this journey very, very long time ago. And so that part of it, like the cerebral part of, oh, okay, this is what you have to do and this is where you're at, wasn't difficult for me to understand. Running multiple companies, having children, and, you know, just like so many of us being full and busy in our schedules, what was tricky for me was in that luteal phase, like the week or so coming into my period, was for some reason, life would always just feel like it would amp up coming into my period. And I would just feel like I was being squeezed all over the place. And then I'd arrive into my bleed week and just be absolutely exhausted, zero patience, just feeling really disconnected and frustrated and sometimes like angry and kind of crusty. And then it would send me into a bit of a spiral in my first couple of days of my bleed and being like, oh, why did I do that to myself again? I know better, da 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 da. You know, that whole story and cycle we go through. And so the luteal phase for me now is really, it is my favorite of all four of the phases, because it is this beautiful, when we talk about seasons and cycles, it's like the fall, which is really this opportunity to just go in and get really clear on like what we're leaving and what we're going to take forward with us. And it's a beautiful time to go in and scrub. So scrubbing that schedule, scrubbing your life, scrubbing out maybe some of the things that we're eating that we know don't make us feel fantastic, but they taste delicious. So we just keep leaning into them, even the relationships in our life and work and all of that. So that for me was the hardest thing to start to step into, but also one of the best when I really got myself there. And I wouldn't say that I am by any stretch that means perfect. There's still periods of time where, and especially too, because I'm 43 now, so I'm in a perimenopausal window where my period's not coming every 28 days. My period might come like 26, 28, 27. Like it's, gonna sway. So it's not like I have this perfect rhythm. So I need to really be tuning into my body and start to listen to her cues. And if she starts to whisper, like, I know in your calendar this is what you intended, but this is actually how I'm feeling. I've gotten to the sweet spot in my life and my body where I will go in and I will scrub up whatever is too much. I'll move some things around so that I'm not, crushing my system and then not feeling good as I arrive into my bleed. So I would say for me personally, that was the trickiest period of time.
Yeah, I think the women in our community resonate with that, having the most difficulty during that phase the most. I recently just posted about this and everyone was like, yes, they experience the premenstrual symptoms the most. Like it feels, that's where I'm out of balance. And from the Ayurvedic standpoint, that's where the fire element can get really out of balance with things like the anger and the liver being willing to cleanse through excess estrogen from the body. And then we have these hormonal symptoms and mood swings and all these things. And it's really interesting that you're saying there's a scrubbing that needs to happen there, because although it's kind of beautiful that we have this fire element that we want to tend to and maximize on, at the same time the uterine lining is starting to already shed and get rid of that. So like how can we mimic that internal rhythm in our external world as well, so that we're working in alignment with nature? And
and we see it in nature, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you look outside in the fall, that's why the leaves are falling. That's why they're not in full bloom anymore. It's why it looks like everything is starting, we call it dying, but really what it's doing is it's just essentially, it's dropping what no longer is serving it at this time in life. It's like bless and release essentially. And now it's going to pull back, go into hibernation, prepare for its winter, where so much work happens, but we don't see it on the surface. So we think nothing is happening. And in reality, it's like the biggest work, which is like when you have your period. I mean, you are literally shedding the lining of an organ, and that's big work. And we don't take reverence of that as women. And so we just keep pushing and pushing, and the body is like, excuse you, like there are big things happening behind the scenes over here. And from like a mental emotional perspective as well, and even from like that neurological perspective, when we actually bleed, this is some of our most creative time in our bodies as women. Yes. And so we could be missing, all of these creative juices that are flowing with our cycle because we're so exhausted because we didn't slow our pace down arriving into that week.
Totally. And I love that you brought up the theme of death, because I think every single time we do shed, it's a grief cycle. Like you said, just simply sifting through of what am I letting go of, what is the identity, maybe relationships or things in my life, so that I can then clear and move forward. And I'm so curious to hear how you've started to integrate this in your business, because I find this is also simultaneously this thing that's the most difficult to let go of our business, of the things that once were not working, or even taking time to reflect on things and having to let them go.
Yeah, I mean, that is a slower process when it comes to business and work. I mean, it also depends as well, too, like how far out you're committed to something. So I work with a lot of entrepreneurs where, they have a program they run that goes for months at a time. And then they're like, I've just done this launch. I've just enrolled X amount of people. I'm not connected to it anymore, or it's actually too much. And now they still have 5 months left with the group. And so it's like, okay, you're not, in some cases, you may actually need to pull the plug depending on what's going on, refund people their money, and you move along. It's like nobody ever wants to do that. But sometimes if things are really going sideways, that might be the reality that happens. And at the moment, it can feel like it's a breakdown, but it's going to lead you towards a pretty beautiful breakthrough for you and the participants. But more often than not, we don't have to like burn the boats. Like everybody talks about just like burning everything down and like starting again. And I oftentimes find that if we feel like that in that moment, it's like that's a huge reality check that if your tendency is to just burn it, drop it, and like run the other way, we definitely need to work on having more balance, more equilibrium. And so instead it's like, okay, so you have these next X amount of months in front of you that you have to get the work done. Let's make sure we're doubling down on you taking care of yourself. So if something can't be dropped in the business right now, we need to get you better quality sleep and rest. We need to make sure that your blood sugar is stable, that you're like, can you do something each day that's for you? You know, drink your warm mug of yum like in the sunshine. Can you lay on the floor for 7 minutes and consciously breathe? Like, so a lot of that is bringing it back to how can you support yourself and work. And then the other side of it is now you need to create that runway. So like for us as a company, you know, we don't plan things out in our business 5 years in advance. We plan things out seasonally instead of like quarterly. We use seasons in our company. And so we'll look at things a few seasons ahead and be like, okay, if this season we're in right now is feeling a little much, what can we do in the next couple of seasons? And it might take, you know, 2 seasons down the road in order for us to implement this. Sometimes it takes 2 years for us to implement this, where we can change some things and actually have it feel better as opposed to it feeling forced or feeling grindy and clunky and feeling like we're trying to hustle to make it happen, when in reality, I don't want to do it. I'm not into it anymore. My team isn't into it anymore. And so I really think a lot of this is we have to give ourselves permission to change direction. You know, and with that, also notice about yourself. If you're someone who is constantly changing direction, that's not what I'm saying, because there could be something in that as well too. But when you are in those moments where you're like, I have known for months, I have known for years, this is no longer what I love to do and what I want to do. You now need to be really honest with yourself and start to put things in motion so that the change can become a reality, not just a wish.
I love that you said slow, gradual change, because I think in our culture, I mean, just look at certain industries like the fashion industry, like how fast that they move, right? And it has to be like, there's such a scarcity mindset that happens there where it's like, if you don't get it, then you're going to miss the boat. When in reality, think about nature, and nature never, I forgot what the quote is. I think it's like
a Lao say, yeah, like nature never rushes, and like, yet there she is. Like it just happens, right? Everything happens. You know, it's so interesting as you're saying that about, you know, this rushing and with nature and all of that. So we've just been finishing a backyard renovation here, and I went to go into like Home Sense, into like a local home decor, and I was like, oh, I'm going to get a couple things for the yard. It's July 18th, okay? It is the middle of summer. I went into Home Sense, no summer stuff left. Everything is pumpkins and fall decor now. And I was like, what month did I just walk into? And it actually felt really gross, because I was like, what is even happening? Like we aren't even literally 4 weeks into summer, and we're already pushing her out the door and getting ourselves ready for the next season. And I think that I just came out of it, and I was with my daughter who's 17, and I was like, that is just so symbolic of the pace of our life and society as a whole right now. Like we just can't even stop for a fucking moment and pause and enjoy it. We're just like, gotta get on to the next. And I was just like, wow.
Totally. And when you think about that in terms of your business, you don't even have time to breathe and see what's not working in your business. And then you're just keep on projecting the same mistakes and obstacles over and over again, like a cycle. So how are you able to kind of structure your business so that you can have those times for a gradual growth and rest, but like still meet your goals and be on top of it?
Well, this has happened over many, many years. And I'm fortunate enough now where I have a team. So it was much harder when it was only me doing it, because you can't see what's right in front of you when you're a team of one. You also can't necessarily see what is coming down the road. And so team definitely supports that, even if it's one other person who can give you some outside perspective. And I also think as well too, it's that tuning into your community and into your clients and really asking, like, and paying attention to what they're asking you. Like, what are the solutions that they're showing up into your business looking for? Because we as the business owner, we have no shortage of ideas. Like, we're the visionaries. That's why we're entrepreneurs. So we think we have the most amazing ideas and this content we're going to create and programs and services we're going to put out there. But we go and do it in a way where we're projecting it as opposed to creating an invitation and asking, what actually would you love to read from me or see from me or benefit from me or, be part of a program, and then create and build out from there. So we've definitely learned to do more of that, because I've had it in the past where I'm like, oh, this is the next program we should create. It's going to be so great. And then we go to launch it and it's like crickets. And then something that I would never have thought that people would be interested in, but one of my assistants would be like, hey, do you notice how many people reach out and are like, have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? What if we go and create that thing? And then sure enough, we create it. And it's like the easiest, launch we'll ever have. So I think that that is part of it. The other thing is you really have to know for yourself what your internal cycles are. So for me, I work really well in concentrated batches of time. So I can show up and I can bang out a couple of days of like back-to-back work and content. But I need slow mornings and I need my family nights. Like I need time off in the evening. So I know for me, I am going to do my best work from like 9:30 in the morning until about 3 in the afternoon. And anywhere outside of that, you're probably not going to get the best version of me. And so it's like building out the most important things in my company in my thriving time. The stuff like writing content or getting back to emails or whatever, I can do that early in the morning when I'm drinking my matcha. I can do that later at night when the kids are at work and, my husband's doing his own thing. But in my like most important on fire time, energetically, that's when the most important work should be getting done. So it's really learning those types of ebbs and flows. And then the final part I would say on that is, we grossly overestimate what we are capable of. So when we're yesing everything in our life and like, yeah, I can totally, collaborate with you on this thing. And then I can also create my program over here and I can do a speaking gig there. And yeah, I can go and record 6 podcasts this week and I can pick up another yoga class for you. And you go and do all of that in a moment of yes energy where you're feeling awesome. And now all of a sudden you're in your low vibration, no energy, and you look at this calendar in front of you and you're like, oh my gosh, who said yes to all of this? And now you have to actually go execute, really pay attention when that happens and check yourself and be like, okay, I will not. Like, I think a lot of people, and I don't know if you've ever felt like this, a lot of entrepreneurs panic when they see white space. They see white space and they tell themselves, like, I need to be productive. I got to go fill that. And I used to do that all the time. There's room. Let's just go add more in there. Let's, be highly productive. And now when I go in and I see white space, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like, that's actually where my best work happens, is when I have more rest time and more white space.
Totally. And that really mimics, like we were just talking about, that point in the cycle where there is that pause, where you do get all that creative juices that really come. I agree. Like, usually my menstruation cycle, it links with the new moon. And so that, I feel so intuitive. Like, the messages that come through there just feel like electric during that time.
Yeah.
And how many times did I just like totally skip over that, from doing hard, intense workouts to just like pushing pedal to the metal with being productive in my business and completely missing those messages.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. And it's like, we're not at fault for it. We have not been, it's only been in the last couple of years that this is even a conversation women are having together, that we're putting out into the world for others to hear. So it's like, but when you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, like me too. I totally feel that. Why have I never thought of that before? How have I never connected to that? But it's because if it's not part of your environment in the normal chat, all you do is you rise to the pace of everyone around you. So if you go look on Instagram and everyone is moving into the next launch, everyone is doing the next thing, you're like, oh, okay, I got to go do that too. And then if you live in a community where everyone is running to the boot camp and to the HIIT classes and out, doing their big long 10K run, you're like, oh, that's what I got to go and do. And so this is also why your environment does matter. Like, I always laugh and say there's certain times in my cycle where I want to have my friends that want to go and like do a really strong workout. And there's certain times where I want my girlfriends that just want to go to the farmer's market and like the yin yoga class. And then there's certain times when I want the friends who want to go for like the 3-hour hike, right? So it's like tuning into and just kind of moving yourself around in those circles so that wherever you're at, you feel like you look outside of yourself and you're like, and there's where I land.
Yeah, it's really fun to see that we as a culture are moving towards those rhythms and more people are waking up. And I think it is difficult because we're seeing successful businesses overriding that. And so we see that as like, oh, well, it must only be possible to meet our goals and to get it that way. So it's so beautiful to have examples of women who are really embodying these cycles and thriving because of it. Have you noticed a shift in your business when you did start to, from prior, other than maybe seeing the physical symptoms in your body, but how your business really shifted because you aligned with these cycles?
Yeah, we became more successful. We actually became more profitable. And so I think the other thing too in business is a lot of people will talk about like revenue generated, but you know, for us, like I'm always really focused on our cash flow and like the profitability of the company. And so as I started to, you know, shift more into cyclical living, which for me really was like in 2016, 2017, I had sold an in-person brick and mortar company, transitioned everything online, you know, was really coming out of a time of like massive burnout of just being in person and showing up the way I was. And when I started to do this, like the company just we were having more successful launches, we were generating more revenue, the company was becoming more profitable. And I really do believe it's because I had this deload period of time every single month. I had a pause moment every single month where then we, instead of like, I don't have time to look at those numbers. I don't have time to evaluate how that went. I don't have time to, you know, go and edit and fix up whatever the thing was. We built the time into the company. So it was like, okay, we've gone and done the thing. Now we have like our behind the scenes energy. Now we need to go in. We need to do this. Like the scrub is part of my life everywhere, in my house, in my body, in my business, all of those things. And my whole team is, you know, very well versed in cyclical living as well too. So it's like it's a language that we all understand. So it is part of a, you know, big way, one of the major, you know, facets in our company of how we choose to do things. Even because when we're talking to our community of women, where women who arrive in my community, they're coming to our community because what they're actually looking for is a different approach. They're looking for permission to not always go, go, go. And so when they get into our community and they notice that we aren't constantly selling you something every single day of the week, we're not creating a call to action every single time we offer you something, you know, it's like, it feels good. It feels good. And then there's like this buildup, and then here we have something to offer, and then we pull back again. And so even the way that we interact with our community is very much like, I'm not just talking this talk and then going and doing the opposite. I'm not like over here saying embrace your divine feminine and then meeting you with all this bro energy. Like it's, you know, we don't flow like that. And so yeah, I think it's the more examples that we can see of that, the better. It can be friggin' scary, I'll tell you. In the beginning, when it was like, what do you mean we're not going to launch 5 times a year? Because our signature program, I was launching it 5 times a year. I was the lead coach on it. I was moving hundreds of women through it by myself every single year. We were creating, you know, great revenue streams, but I was exhausted. I was so tired, and my kids would go to bed and I would be on the computer until my eyes were burning, doing all my client files, returning emails, report of findings for functional tests. Like it was crazy. And I remember looking at myself one day in the mirror and being like, you are on your way to becoming your own patient really quickly. Like you're going to be your own client, needing all the support you are helping these women with. And that was the big change, but it was very uncomfortable when we went from 5 launches to 3, because now all of a sudden I had all this space, and I was like, and all I was like thinking is, let's go create a new program. And our program director was like, oh my God, no, like you're not allowed. And so it was really helpful. This is the other thing I would say is, and this doesn't have to be like another team member, but you need to have people in your life who will call you out on your own BS and be like, are you serious? You just made this change because you said you were feeling strangled by the business you had created and you had no time. Now you have time and you're so uncomfortable with all the time. All you are trying to do is busy up your freaking time. And so for me, it was this like, right, yeah, okay. So what is it that I really need or really desire? And so, you know, it's a journey, it's a trip. It's a really awesome one though, if you can witness yourself doing those things to yourself, because we see everyone else do it. We witness a friend and we're like, oh my God, here they go again. They're doing the thing they say they don't want to do. And we think we're so wise and smart giving them advice. And then we go and do the exact same thing.
Totally. It's so important to have that accountability and just that kind of like mirror and reflection, because it can come up in such sneaky ways. Like, it really is like the mind will try to self sabotage and the ego just wants to keep you small and in that same loop story. And like you said, it's karmic, so it can really take time to really smooth that groove, and it comes up in subtle layers every time. But it's so awesome to see that growth that you've taken it. And I'm so curious, are you familiar with human design, and are you
Oh yeah, yeah, I'm a projector. So
I knew it.
the way I built my company, I was like, a girlfriend of mine, she was part of my team back in like 2017. She's like, "Oh my gosh, you have to do your human design chart." And I was like, "Well, I have no idea what that is." And she's like, "For sure you're a manifesting generator." And I had no idea what it was. And I started to read a little bit and I was like, "Oh yeah, for sure I'm a Manny Gen," because they do so many different things and all of that. And then I ran my chart and it was like emotional projector 1-3 profile. I'm like, oh my gosh. And as I started to dive deeper, and I really honestly, human design, so I've done 2 levels of certification with it now. And it is a study. Like, you need to study it to understand it. There's so much to it. But the more that I began learning, I was just like, I actually loved it. It gave me such a sense of relief and permission to actually start to run my business the way that I wanted to, but I was terrified to. And it has really benefited me. So yeah, how about you? What are you?
I'm a 1-3 projector as well. And
Ah,
I knew you were a projector because the way that you were speaking on getting to know the needs of my clients first and then create, because that's very much something that I've learned from my community that always is like provides the most value. So now, and I have a lot of projectors that are in this community too. So I'd love to hear, I know this is a whole other podcast in itself, but just any little nuggets or something that you're really resonating with your projector self and how you bring that into your business.
the rest piece, huge for me. And it, when I had started to learn, I was already about a year and a half deep into cyclical living. And so when learning more about being a projector and having these concentrated work periods when you were invited to, so for me, that felt very much like the follicular and ovulatory phase. Like, my body is inviting me to rise up to the occasion, to have this concentrated higher energy vibration. And then the luteal phase in my period, my menstrual phase, was me pulling into the rest that is so critical as a projector. The other thing as well too is because I love helping humans, I would very much be that person that would offer advice when it was not asked of me. And so learning what it meant to actually wait for the invitation, I was like, oh, okay. Like that. And so that has saved me so much personal energy, because I would just jump in to try to help people. And I would be so frustrated because I'd be giving them all this advice and all these tips. They would do nothing about it. And I was the only one losing energy because I was frustrated that they weren't taking action. Meanwhile, they were like, "Girl, I never even asked you for help. You just like inserted yourself into my life." And I was like, "You are correct. You did not ask for my help." So that has freed me emotionally on such a huge level. And then understanding a lot about my profile as a 1-3, it's like investigator for sure. I'm a student for life. I love learning. If I'm interested in something, I will plow through that information. I will plow through that book in a day. Like, I'm so hungry for it, and I'm a sponge. So if I am really interested in something, I literally need to hear it and read it once, and it's an imprint. Like, it's in me. And that 3 part also made so much sense for me, because as that, it's like we talk about it in layman's terms as trial and error. For me, like, it's the experimentation. I've never been afraid to go and try something, and if it doesn't work, I've never called it a failure. I'm just like that this wasn't a thing for me. So yeah, I would say that. And the emotional piece, like, definitely I'm the person, I have to sleep on it. You cannot rush me into a decision. I need to feel my way through things. I don't move quickly. I don't make a decision quickly. And yeah, so for me, it was massive. And then really learning what my husband and my children were, I was like, this should be handed to you when you have your baby.
Totally.
Because understanding, raising these little humans who have their own, energy to them, it would have been really helpful when they were younger, understanding that.
Totally. And I've heard before too, like, that was the original intention too, is because we didn't want our children to go through all that deconditioning that they had to do. But what if we really just raised them as the types that they wanted to be and let that authenticity shine from a young age?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I really resonate, obviously, with everything you said with being a projector. It's totally the same ebbs and flows that I've been through, but specifically when you were talking about inserting yourself, I think that as a projector, you have so much knowledge, especially with that 1-3 line, and then you can really see ahead, almost like 5 steps ahead. And a lot of times it feels hard because you almost feel a little bit lonely in that, of like having that intuition from it and just like wanting to share and be seen in these gifts that you have. But there's so many different relationships that I have and friends that I've had since for life, but they may not be like so interested in like the nitty gritty stuff of spirituality, and they'll meet me there when they're ready. But that has been so helpful too, and just kind of waiting until they do catch up, or maybe they never want to go down that path. But recently I've just been in a major transition. I just got out of my Saturn return, and so I'm really noticing like a lot of up leveling happening in my friendships. And one in particular, I'm thinking about a friend, and I was really helping her during this like massive breakup that she was going through in her Saturn return, and I was realizing like I was exhausted for so long because I kept telling her XYZ, this is what you got to do to get out of it, and it wasn't. She had to experience it herself, and I've always known to ask questions and be in the seat of the teacher, but really refraining back and allowing her to kind of integrate at her own time. And now she's like fully integrated because she did it through herself and she was empowered through that. So I think that that's just like so important as a projector, and especially because a lot of projectors are in leadership positions.
Yeah. Well, because it's that visionary role, right? And then the other thing I would say of that is, I think the tendency as a projector is to want to do everything yourself because you feel like you hold all the information and no one else can understand what you understand, or they can't do it the same way that you do it. But I have a team of 10 women on my team, and 2 are projectors and the rest are generators, and a couple of mani-gens. And what's been really awesome is actually surrendering to that and like really empowering people to put their own gifts out into the world and to step into that leadership role. It's allowed me to stop doing the things that actually were never mine to do in the first place. I just made them mine because I take a lot of responsibility and the work that I do and put out into the world. And so yeah, it is. I'm very grateful to have discovered human design.
Yeah, I love that. And kind of my last question around this is, what does rest like exactly look like? I think it's so different for each person, and I want to honor that. But I think even for projectors, and I work with a lot of women who have the fire element, it can be really difficult for them to even notice what exactly is rest during that week of your cycle.
So I'm also a Virgo, so I'm an earth sign. And for me, rest is not like literally laying in bed, it's nothing in my calendar. So, and it's choice. Rest for me feels like choice. So if I want to work, I'll work. If I want to, lift weights, I'll go and do that. If I like, rest for me is not about being like my dog, which I don't know if you're using the video, who is chilling on my pillows right now. Like that's her best life. Rest for me means I get to move at a really slow, fluid pace. It means I'm not rushing. It means that I'm not like, feeling like the clock is counting me down throughout the day. And so when I am on my menstrual phase, I try very much to create that. As I said, my period can swing a couple of days. So like this month, mine came 2 days earlier than it did last month. And it was like, oh, I have a couple of full days in front of me. So how do I take care of myself in that? I get to bed earlier the nights before. I stay a little bit more quiet in those mornings when then for the rest of the day I have to show up and communicate. I make sure I eat really well. And I actually communicate it with my family. Like they have known for the last few days, look, like my Tuesday and Wednesday next week are thick days. So if I'm more quiet, if I'm just it is not about you. I just need to like go inside so I can manage that. So when I come on the other side, I actually still really feel good. And so I think that communicating with people in our life is really important. When I don't do that, that's when I'm snappy. I don't have patience. And then they're like, ugh, like what is wrong with you? That doesn't happen if I communicate it ahead of time.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think that really mirrors just really connecting with your intuition and allowing your body to be the co-creator in those cycles, so that, again, like when you lead from that place, then you can also start to get that creative juices flowing during that time too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jen, for your time and your wisdom. I simply love the work that you're doing, and helping women with their businesses. And I'd love for you to share where our community can find you, and if you have any ways and offerings right now for our community to connect with you.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, so the best place, I mean, jenpike.com. I'm over on Instagram. It's actually the only social feed that I am part of. I cannot do all the things I do not want to. So Instagram, and then I have two podcasts, the Simplicity Sessions, which is all about women's health and hormones, and then the Audacious Woman, which is for women and practitioners in business. And then I do have some content over on YouTube. So those are the best places to connect. I have a lot of freebies. So if you go to jenpike.com, you'll see up at the top a section of resources and freebies. And so I have a free mini cycle syncing guide. You know, I've got like a very gentle 7-day detox, which really detox for me is just, it's doing the scrub. Right, of your body and your life. It's nothing super intense. And then I have some free business resources as well. So that's the best space to go.
Awesome. I'll have all of that linked below. And thank you again so much. I'm so excited for our community to listen to this episode. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye, everyone.